liked Good Times though.
Three's Company.
I didn't like that one either.
Didn't like any of the good ones.
Yeah. There's nothing about I wasn't big in sitcoms, like partially because when I was watching them as a kid, none of it was really
When
relevant.
Roger was growing up, he only watched sad documentaries about starving children.
No, they were happy documentaries about starving children.
Macabre, happy documentaries.
Oh, I used to watch Night Gallery all the time. I love that show in Twilight Zone.
Uh-huh.
Rod Serling. I used to think his name was like up there with Hitchcock when it came to, or at least when it came to like.
Well, that's Alfred Hitchcock Presents was, a TV show of the same ilk at the same era, so that makes sense.
Night Gallery went a step further because they made it a little more visual, grotesque. Although the ones with the rats, the giant rat and the rat on the moon, kind of stupid.
The ones with the rats.
Except for Willard. Willard was kind of weird.
Willard Scott?
Willard and then Ben. Wasn't Ben the sequel to Willard? Willard was the one where they remade it, but it was basically the kind of the lonesome boy who befriended her.
I thought that was Ben.
Then Ben was a sequel to something, though.
It was? I thought Ben was the first one.
Oh, was it? Or maybe...
I don't know. I'm not going to stake my reputation on it.
Right. All I know is Ben...
I know that Michael Jackson had a number one song out of Ben.
And a horror film. It's a sequel. See, I was right. To the 1971 movie Willard.
To Willard. There you go. I did not know that.
Doubt me, will you?
Yes. All right. You ready?
All right. Hiding.
Here we go. Veronica, I need a verbal yes from you.
Yes.
It's like sitting in an exit row.
Okay. Yes.
Here we go.
The Daily Tech News Show is powered by its listeners, not outside organizations. If you get value from the show, consider giving a little back. As little as $1 a month keeps great tech news and analysis coming your way commercial-free. Find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/support.
This is the Daily Tech News for Monday, June 12th, 2017. I'm Tom Merritt, joining me, Veronica Belmont, making your Mondays bright again. Right, Veronica?
That's right.
It's all we do. It's all we think about. It's all we plan for all weekend long, coming on Monday and giving you the bot takes. Veronica is going to tell us whether we should go see a therapist. I mean, particularly a bot therapist. We probably all need to see a therapist.
It can't hurt, really.
Yeah, but no, there's a couple of them out there, but one is actually like going out on the limb and saying it can improve you, not just a guidance thing. They're taking some stand that others haven't taken.
I'm a little skeptical, but we will talk more about it in the main story.
Let's start with a few tech things you should know about. The Essential Phone, that's the one from Andy Rubin's new company. It'll be launching on Sprint in the United States. And all the snarky blogs are laughing at Andy Rubin. Ha ha ha, you could only get Sprint. It's been kind of mean headline day for poor Andy Rubin. An unlocked version can be used on other networks as well. You don't have to use it just on Sprint.
They're calling it the not so essential.
I know. Isn't that mean?
That's kind of hurtful. Microsoft will unify most versions of Minecraft around the Bedrock engine with the Better Together update coming in August. Aside from the PS4 and Xbox 360, each version will share the same DLC, updates, and access to the community store with support for creating worlds across platform.
That's a lot of Minecraft. Minecraft in 4K. Although it's kind of 8-bit blocky, so I'm not sure you need that. Here are some more top stories and more along the Microsoft announcements. Don't forget, Microsoft had their announcement at E3 yesterday. Sony will have theirs today, and we'll talk about Sony's announcement on tomorrow's show. But yesterday at E3, Microsoft officially unveiled the Xbox One X, previously codenamed Project Scorpio. The chip inside is still called the Scorpio when they referred to it during the keynote. Uses a liquid-cooled custom AMD APU and 12 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory, capable of 6 teraflops of graphical computation, supporting 4K resolution at 60 frames per second. The console also includes an Ultra HD Blu-ray drive, 1 terabyte of storage, retains an HDMI in connector, but does lose the Connect port. Yeah. All Xbox One accessories will work with the console. The Xbox One X will go on sale worldwide November 7th for $499. And the Xbox One S, which they've set themselves up for pronunciation confusion here. The Xbox One S, as in Scorpio, but not Project Scorpio. See, it just keeps getting confusing. Anyway, the existing Xbox One S is now $299.
I keep wanting the name to be a palindrome.
Did you see that? I tweeted that.
No, I didn't.
I said, yes, if they had named it what did I say? The Xbox One Nox Ob X. It could have been a palindrome. Microsoft also announced that backward compatibility for original Xbox console games will be coming to Xbox One consoles later this year. All the Xbox One consoles. Support will need to be added per game, but original discs and Xbox Live purchases will work once supported. And that's their big deal here, is they're saying it's just the specs that are being updated. All your controllers, all your accessories, all your games will still work on the Xbox One X, whether you have bought them on an Xbox One or an Xbox One S in the past. It's just new insides. Do you think that's enough to make people want to get the Xbox now?
I mean, it's not for me. I'm not like chomping at the bit to go get one. We have an older Xbox. That's the only console we really have left in the house. But I don't know. I mean, with all this backwards compatibility stuff, goodness, are they going to still? So new games will come out. They'll still be playable on the S.
Yep. And the original Xbox One as well.
Which is good, of course.
And the Xbox One S does some 4K. It just doesn't have as much power inside to do the total native resolution. So Xbox One X indisputably better than the PS4 Pro at this moment, but not better enough to overcome game selection. So if the game you want is on PlayStation, you're probably still fine getting the PlayStation Pro.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I've been so off the console bit for a while now and pretty much exclusively PC that to me it doesn't really matter that much, but it seems like people are relatively excited.
I mean, it's a lot of power for $499. I'm not going to argue with that. And I think they're doing the right thing in keeping it 100% compatible. What's
going on with the Kinect, though?
Yeah, they just don't even care about the Kinect.
Poor Kinect.
I know.
According to a representative of Uber's board, moving on, after a 7-hour meeting, the board unanimously voted to adopt the recommendations of Eric Holder's investigation into toxic company culture. Results of the investigation are expected to be released to employees on Tuesday, June 13th. Reuters reports that the board also discussed CEO Travis Kalanick temporarily stepping away from the company as the board narrows down the authority and scope of his position, which sources say is not one of the Holder report recommendations. Recode reports Uber SVP of Business Emil Michael sent an email to staff saying David Richter, the vice president of strategic initiatives, will be taking his place.
Yeah, so a couple of shoes waiting to drop. One is, does Travis take a step away? No one expects him to step down, but does he take a step away? Does he take a leave of absence? And the other was whether Emil Michael would stay in his position. And we got the answer to that, a couple hours ago before the show. Emil Michael stopped being an employee of Uber yesterday. He sent an email today to the employees, but the email said, I no longer work here, everybody. And this is the guy who acquired Otto. He did a lot of the acquisitions that built Uber up in the early days and was considered essentially the right-hand man of Travis Kalanick. Now, a lot of people say not only will this clear up a lot of the company culture, that's the expectation, but it will allow Travis to hire someone who will clearly be a COO and number two versus being a COO and also having to compete with Emil Michael for Travis Kalanick's attention.
Yes. Yeah, it's crazy. I was watching all of, there were so many updates from the board meeting happening yesterday. It's so fascinating how emergency board meetings like this just take place on the weekend. And they were just leaking information out into the press. It was pretty fascinating to watch happen in real time.
And we're going to get some more of this tomorrow, one would expect, because the briefing of the employees about the Holder report will happen, and I'm sure we'll get more details as that happens. Security firms ESET and Dragos are releasing detailed analyses of malware used in an attack on a power company called Ukrenergo 7 months ago. The malware was used in an attack on the electric transmission station north of Kiev, Ukraine, operated by Ukrenergo, blocking out 1/5 of total power capacity for an hour. The malware, which is called Indestroyer, which is frankly my favorite of the alternate names for it, but everyone seems to be going with Crash Override. Perhaps they're Crash Bandicoot
Wait,
fans.
is that from Hackers?
Yeah.
I thought that was from Hackers, Crash Override.
Crash Override. Yeah, so that's probably why it has the I like Indestroyer, though. That's just powerful. Anyway, Crash Override. It's the second known case of code built to disrupt physical systems. If you don't remember, the first was Stuxnet, used against Iranian centrifuges. Crash Override can automate mass power outages, and the part that has security researchers both impressed and worried is swappable plug-in components. So even though this one was used against a Ukrainian system, those plug-in components could be adapted to be used against any electric utility, as well as being usable when disconnected from the internet. It could be a logic bomb. Dragos Rodley says if power grid operators do closely monitor their control system networks, they should see this before it has a chance to unleash the payload. But that's the problem, is power grid operators, in many cases, do not closely monitor their control system networks.
Well, and why is that?
Legacy, staffing, prioritization, good question. They really need to get serious, and I think that's why ESET and Dragos are making a lot out of this, is to say, look, this is serious, you guys. This was a test run that knocked off a major city or part of a major city for a significant amount of time, even if it's just an hour, and we think it was a test. We think it was a test run that they could then use against other systems. So while you have the chance, your electrical systems are eminently securable. You just need to do it. And that is the summer of sharks that we are experiencing these days. This is the kind of wake-up call that Justin Robert Young was talking about last Thursday.
Yeah, that's scary stuff. And it's just, I think it is only, as you said, probably going to get a lot worse in the future. Sorry, my Wi-Fi is being a little wonky, so if I'm not talking as much, it's because
it's
I'm
probably
waiting
just
to catch
Crash
up to you.
Override.
It's probably affecting my system as well, naturally. One of China's largest bike-sharing companies, Mobike, is launching their service with 1,000 bikes in Manchester and Salford in the UK, June 29th, their first service outside Asia. It operates in China and Singapore, and Chinese bike-sharing company OFO started a pilot program with 20 bikes in Cambridge 2 months ago. These are dockless services that let users lock a bike anywhere.
Yeah, so it's not like the ones you may be familiar with in the U.S. where you have a bike rack that you
like
rent
city
it from.
bike or city bike share.
These, you just lock the bike anywhere it's legal to lock a bike, and the app logs where that location is, and that's how you find the next bike. So it spreads them around a lot more. They are working with the city of Manchester. Salford's just kind of a suburb of Manchester, so Mobike is pretty much going into the Manchester area, and they've been working with Greater Manchester to make sure that these don't get locked up in the wrong places and cause impediments on sidewalks. And they're doing a lot of work, unlike ride-sharing companies in the past. They're doing a lot of work with the city to set this up for success, and it's huge. This kind of ride sharing, this kind of bike sharing is huge in China.
A lot of bikes in San Francisco get stolen, the city bikes. And I think that maybe that would be negated a little bit if they did have some of these GPS tracking devices on them that weren't easily removable. But yeah, I see city bikes we have areas where you can go where you just see basically a bike graveyard, or people like tearing apart bikes, and those city bikes are always there also. So it's kind of a big problem here in American cities, at least, or at least in San Francisco.
Yeah, and I don't know if some of the culture of China is such that it makes it work better there than it might in other places. So it'll be interesting to see how this catches on in Manchester.
Well, yeah, like in the Netherlands, for example, people don't worry about their bikes being stolen because everyone has one.
Right.
You know, it's not a crazy expensive, ludicrous thing to own. You know, bikes in San Francisco can be very, very expensive, and people need them for transportation, but they're not as ubiquitous as they are in other places.
Yeah, and that makes all the difference. You know, can you get over that hump to where stealing a bike just isn't profitable?
It's not profitable. Yeah.
Yeah. U.S. banks are launching their mobile payment system called Zelle, Z-E-L-L-E, to pay people by phone number or email address. It's their Venmo competitor, but it's not an app. And I think that may be the mistake, but I'll explain why they're doing it this way. Customers can send payments to each other instantly. So even with Venmo, you have to wait. It'll tell you the transaction is happening instantly, but you have to wait for it to finish. Customers of JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, US Bank Corp, and Capital One automatically get this. A total of 30 national and regional banks and credit unions will work with it over the course of the next year, some of them getting it sooner than others. And the network was created by an industry consortium called Early Warning Services, LLC. So the idea is if you're already using, say, QuickPay from Citibank, you don't have to change your app. Zelle will start working in that app. Each bank can still have its own payment app, but someone using the Citibank app can use Zelle to send payment to somebody using the Bank of America app, and it will happen instantly. So the advantages here are that you get instant transactions and it works within the payment apps you're using, unless you're using the popular ones, right? PayPal, Venmo, etc. Anyone can use Zelle by signing up. If you're like, I don't have a bank that uses Zelle, you can sign up for ClearExchange, digital payments network, and use Zelle. And I think that's where it's going to have a problem. If you use your bank's app for payments, this is perfect, right? It doesn't require you to install anything. But how many of us do that?
I pay a lot of my bills through my bank.
Pay bills, sure, but this is payments to payment, person to person payments.
Yeah, I just really do it between my husband and I primarily for accounts we don't share paying into, for example. And it's kind of a pain because sometimes we have to use ACH and that costs like $3,
right? Or
we have to send a lot of money over Square Cash and that takes time. It's not instant. So this sounds like actually a pretty good solution for that.
Yeah, and I'm not damning it out of the gate, but I think it's smart for them to integrate it into the apps you already have. I would also put out a Zelle app, and maybe it'd still be powered by ClearExchange. But if you put out an app, people expect an app. They're like, okay, it's a Venmo competitor. Where do I get it? This takes too long to explain. Well, if you have this bank, you already have it. But if you have this bank, you go and do this and sign up for that. Just branded Zelle. And I know why they didn't, because they're like, this is a system, not an app, and we don't want to be competing with each other. We want people to use our bank's app. But I think that's...
So just use it like almost like a layer between the Zelle payment stuff and your bank, so that like Mint, for example, like you can see the transactions. It's like another abstraction layer between your banking and you, but you can still use it to transfer money between accounts. I mean, I think it just helps for brand recognition. Like you said, people expect a customer-facing product with stuff like this.
And BioCow points out, he works in the industry, by the way, if your bank uses it, then a lot of times you can sign up with a click. So I'm not saying they're doing it wrong by having it integrated into the bank apps by any stretch. I get that. Hey, folks, if you want to get all the tech headlines each day in about 5 minutes, be sure to subscribe to dailytechheadlines.com. You can get it as a podcast. You can get it as a flash briefing on the Amazon Echo, or you can get it in the Anchor app at anchor.fm. Woe betide those who use Wobot. I just wanted to say woe betide. But Wired's Megan Multeney wrote up Wobot on Wired.com. It's a daily chat conversation, mood tracking, video playing, word game playing therapist that you check in once a day with. And it kind of uses cognitive behavioral therapy principles to improve your mood. $39 a month. So, it's way more expensive than any other app you use, probably, but way less expensive than a therapist, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's less than one of the big things that kind of hit the scene recently were apps like Talkspace, for example, that were essentially apps that connected you to a real licensed therapist. And you could talk to them through the messaging platform, and it was HIPAA compliant, and it was all private, and you only shared as much information as you wanted to, and it was supposed to help you open up to a therapist and feel comfortable chatting in that way. And you could do video calls and stuff as well. But this is really taking it to the next level. The Wobot does not do anything. It will not diagnose you. It will not prescribe you medicine. It's not a psychiatrist. It's a robot therapist. But it's really more to kind of gather that information about your mood and give you an outlet, a non-judgmental outlet for sharing what's going on in your world.
And I think the thing that struck me about this so much is that it's also not using machine learning.
No.
It is apparently still effective. They've in fact done a paper comparing it to a control group that was using a self-help book, and they found that the people using Wobot did feel less, or did report anyway, it was self-reported. They reported less anxiety than the people using the ebook. So it has some kind of effect, but it's just a tree. It's just it's just following a tree, not learning about you.
It's complete. Yeah, it's deterministic. It's just like will spit back responses based on what you're feeding it. But like you said, it's not using any kind of artificial intelligence, so it's not learning your behavior and adjusting itself accordingly. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But I also really agree with that, because it's very easy to get that kind of thing very wrong. And this is not something that you want to leave up to chance, because if you have someone who is very, upset, going through a hard time, not picking up on the right cues could be dangerous.
Yeah.
So I think that this is taking the smarter step, which is to be more of an encouraging measure to get people to open up and talk, but not be giving you, feedback really about what you're saying necessarily that could turn out to be the wrong kind of feedback.
And in fact, if it detects a severe problem, it'll send someone resources where they can get real help. It won't try to go beyond its range. So you may be already dismissing this, going like, okay, well, what good is this? But talking to a bot does seem to help people open up. Now, we mentioned the one story about Wobot, but there was also a 2014 DARPA study about a bot named Ellie that participants were told in one group it was a bot, which it was, and in another group they were told that it was a person. And the people who were told it was a bot opened up more than the people who thought the bot was in fact a person. So there is something to the fact that when there's not a human being on the other end, we don't feel as judged, and we're willing to say more things.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that. Like, people talk to bots all the time. I have seen the chat logs for my own personal bot, for example. I know the kinds of things they open up about, and it can be kind of intense. People don't necessarily always want to share their deepest, darkest secrets with another human being because of that fear of being judged. But a robot doesn't care. It's not going to judge you. It's not going to feel any differently about you. It may send back different responses the more intelligent it becomes. Not that Wobot will, but in the future, potentially. But yeah, it's a judgment-free zone.
Yeah.
Safe space.
And even just texting therapists, they find people have less anxiety about talking to them. So I think this is an interesting thing. I'm not sure I would pay $39 a month for it yet. Maybe if you really need that, it's worth it. And you can't afford, a professional therapist, which is much more expensive. I can get that. But I look forward to the day where there is a machine learning bot that can really adapt itself. Not so much that I even want it to diagnose, but just to be able to have that sense of caring about you. That's the one thing that a decision tree is never going to say is like, Tom, I know you've mentioned that you have a fear of heights before. Do you think that played into this, right? Like you're not going to get anything like that.
Something that I think kind of covers like a middle ground between this and an actual human being is something like Coco, which is a chatbot that's available on Kick, for example, and I think a few other platforms. And Coco does similar kinds of things where it allows you to recast your thoughts in a more positive light. So you say what kind of issue you're having, and then it completely anonymously sends out that message to other Coco users. And they then try to say, well, what if you thought about it this way?
Oh, wow. So it's like crowd sharing anonymously your therapy session. That's
like
pretty
I can
interesting.
say like, I'm having some stress about this thing I'm doing at work, and I don't know how my fellow employees are perceiving what I'm doing. Like, what do you guys think? And they can say like, well, maybe they're seeing it this way, or maybe you should look at it this way. And to me, that was a really useful way of kind of, like I said, recasting thoughts in a different way, and kind of getting an outside perspective without that judgment of talking to people who know you.
And it probably gives the other people in the network a little fulfillment that they're helping, not just being helped.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother side of things for sure. That people get a lot of good vibes out of helping other folks.
There's another one that was mentioned in this Wired article called TheraChat, which I think is another interesting use of chatbots, where therapists use it to keep patients engaged in between sessions. You maybe only go to therapist once a month, but you can talk to TheraChat every day, and then the records are viewable by your therapist. So that opening up you do, or those chats that you have, are actually helping with your diagnosis from a professional.
Yeah, this sounds like smart journaling. So you can essentially write down what you're feeling at any given moment, and instead of having to just do it in a notebook or wherever, your therapist will get immediate access to that.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, Wobot, you'd be crazy not to read about it. Go check it out, wired.com.
Cool stuff.
Yeah. No, this is really cool. And I think this is a case where there's some helpful things happening and very interesting things happening, but we're only seeing the beginning of what can be done here. Both on the clinical side, but just on the, that I just want to talk to somebody, but I don't want to talk to somebody who's going to judge me side. And like you said, you kind of see that already. Thanks to everybody who participates in our subreddit. You can submit stories and vote on them at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. Time to check in with Chris Christensen for the Tech in Travel Minute. If you're headed to India, Chris has a tip.
This is Chris Christensen from the Amateur Traveler with another Tech in Travel Minute. It's an interesting plan. If it works for India, we'll be giving all of their tourists who arrive with an e-visa a free SIM card for their phone. The SIM card won't have a lot of data or voice time on it. It will have about 50 megabytes of data available on it and just a little bit of call time, but the idea is to give you enough so that you could call if you got any problems. And they're also rolling out with that a number that you can call where you can have questions answered in 12 different languages. Now, they're not the only ones to have this idea. They got their idea from a similar program in Sri Lanka. They didn't get their idea from a program that's rolling out in Thailand, which will require tourists to use specific SIM cards so that they can be tracked. They say for the tourist safety, but how creepy is that? I'm Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I didn't realize that you had to use a particular SIM card in Thailand. Send your pics to us, folks. Feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com. You can find more pics at dailytechnewsshow.com/pics, and you can find more travel tech at amateurtraveler.com. A couple of emails before we get out of here. One from Scott. Your story Friday about new limits on Amazon Cloud Storage and the time it takes to re-upload data to a news service reminded me of my use of Cloud HQ. It's a service that allows you to synchronize data between cloud storage subscriptions. I use it to sync data between Google Drive, OneDrive, and Box. The user who complained about having to re-upload everything if he switches from Amazon's cloud to something else may be able to synchronize his data to a new service without having to re-upload everything. It just happens cloud to cloud in that case.
Nice.
Yeah. And then we got another one related to the same story. Andrew wrote in about Amazon Glacier. In fact, a few people have mentioned this in various emails and Slack discussions about it. Glacier lets you back up without needing to get them back right away. So once your document gets to the front of the queue, it's moved off to long-term cold storage. If you want a file back, you put a request in and you don't get it right away. It gets to the front of the queue maybe a couple of hours later, and that's when your data comes out of long-term storage. So this is meant for somebody who just wants to keep their photos in a safe place, but doesn't need to look at them all the time. My monthly bill, he says, is usually around 20 cents, although I only have 25 gigabytes in there, and that doesn't change much. Looking at the calculator, Amazon provides holding 2 terabytes in there, and adding an extra gig a month would give you a monthly bill of $8.20, which I think you'll agree is very reasonable. Even if you accessed a lot of the stored content, it's not too bad. 2 terabytes stored with 100 gigabytes transferred out in a month would be $15.85. To get around the retrieval timings, I use Glacier as my third line of defense. All my data gets put on a Synology NAS, which I would go to if my laptop became unusable. However, should my house catch fire and I lose both the laptop and the network attached storage, I have Glacier to revert back to. And he's got a little bit more information here about scripts and Raspberry Pi. If you're interested, we'll have that in the show notes at dailytechnewsshow.com. But I think, yeah, a lot of times people will sign up for backup or storage that is built to give you immediate access when maybe they don't need it. And something like Glacier might be worthwhile to check into.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart way of prioritizing data.
Absolutely. Finally, this week's Your Private Driver, which is a regular column from Sakani Wright, features some lessons from the game Cities Skyline for cities trying to deal with ride-sharing traffic. You can find that column right now at dailytechnewsshow.com. Big thanks to Sakani for making these columns happen. They're interesting perspectives from the driver's side of ride-hailing and ride-sharing, which I don't think we get often enough out there. Well, thank you, Veronica Belmont, for joining us as always. Anything to tell folks about before we get out of here?
No, you can check out my bot at growbot.io and listen for new episodes of Sword and Laser at swordandlaser.com.
Yep, we've got an interview that we did at Baycon with James S.A. Corey, the two authors that combined to make James S.A. Corey, who wrote the books that the TV show The Expanse is based on.
That's right. That'll be coming up on Wednesday.
Thanks to everybody who gives a little value back for the value they get from the show, including Andrew Dorado, Joe King, Adam Scaramella, and many, many, many more. We cannot do the show without your support, and we seriously thank you. We're up one patron over last month. That's really all I ever want to see, is that we raise at least one patron every month. I know some people have to cancel for various reasons, but if somebody else picks them up, I feel good about it. Patreon.com/DTNS. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. We're live Monday through Friday. Come and join us. You can go to diamondclub.tv and jump in the chat there at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 2030 UTC. You can do it at alphageekradio.com as well. We're at facebook.com/dailytechnewsshow if you want to talk with other users. And our website is dailytechnewsshow.com. Back tomorrow with an E3 special with Patrick Beja.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Very nice. Very nice, the show, Veronica.
Titles?
Titles, please.
Apt-Get install therapist.
I think that was funny.
What was it? Apt-Get?
Yeah, Apt-Get install therapist.
really
Wobot,
good.
how does that make you feel? So, yeah, woe is bot, trashing our rights. Row, row, row your boat. Max
Apt-Get
head shrink.
install therapist is funny.
Oh, sorry, I didn't. What was that? Sorry.
Internet.
Say again?
Apt-Get. I'm voting for Apt-Get.
Got it.
Me too.
I'm going to vote for Max head shrink.
Max head shrink. That's pretty good too.
The Xbox marketing nightmare. Wait, I don't. Man, these freeze while reading. Xbox One XS. Wait, I just freeze while reading. Why is it still scrolling? It doesn't do anything. This button doesn't do anything for me.
Do you have a script turned off? Because it works for me.
Maybe. Powerful.
Oh, it stops titles from reloading while hovering over the list. Maybe
Oh.
you weren't hovering over the list.
I'm-
RTFM, Roger. Come on.
should require an instruction manual to use. Buy and sell. That's pretty funny. I like that one.
Buy and sell is pretty good.
Buy and sell. Which is crash override hacks the Gibson.
Veronica acts like bot judges users.
Dude, where's my bike? You know, I'm trying to remember the city. It's either Portland or Seattle. But they had a bike sharing program. And what they did was they took a bunch of old bikes, but not like, not from the 50s, but like old 10-speed bikes.
This is every city that's ever existed.
This
This already sounds like an Austin story to me.
Hold on, let me continue. Jeez,
Okay,
I haven't
all right.
finished yet.
All right.
Painted them yellow. What they did was they
Yep.
pulled out the gears, so it was a single gear
Yep.
bike. But the city was in a depression, so it would take a lot of work to pedal out of it, and so people would just leave them, like once they got to the end of the city. Yeah, that's it. They're just like Austin. Built in
Yeah, no, it
depression.
was a bunch of cities did that. You're right. That's either Seattle or Portland was the first, though.
But you just make the bikes physically unable to leave the area. Also,
But the yellow bikes in Austin all got stolen anyway.
What if you make them really ugly?
They were pretty ugly.
Yeah.
Jeez, it just goes to show people still. I don't know.
I think they were like selling them for scrap metal or something.
Yeah, that's usually what seems to be happening around here anyway.
They shouldn't have made them out of copper wire. That's
There's your problem.
Copper. Well, I remember when people were stealing catalytic converters for the platinum.
yeah. Those bikes that were made entirely of copper wire and catalytic converters were just asking to be stolen.
Fine, I'll go back to the old Ben Franklin bike, the one made out of wood.
I'm gonna say Apt-Get install therapist, right?
I still like Max Hedrick, but that's fine. That's fine. I'm
All right.
voted by by Veronica.
Max Head Shrink's pretty good. Runner up.
Yeah.
We got a lot of responses to Friday's show. I think our Friday shows generally get more responses because it's Friday and we're feeling like happy that we're headed to the weekend.
Feeling goofy. Andrew Carr, Amazon Glacier is a little close. Password replacements. Summer of Sharks. Summer of Sharks.
I mentioned that we had a leftover bottle of amaretto, and Louis Lecomte posted several recipes for drinks that use amaretto. That's very helpful. Thank you for that. Roger is so funny. Keep feeding them pigs, bro.
What?
Were you feeding? What did we say about feeding pigs?
No, I said like you were talking about foods like bacon. I'm trying to say something about being health conscious and vegetarians or something. And I said that's great. Just feed the salad bar to the pig and then eat the pig.
My biggest laugh of the day came out of your conversation over Vegemite with Roger. Oh yeah, I don't like eating salt alone, but when I put salt in something in the right amount, it tastes great.
It's good.
You know, I'm gonna start selling human salt licks for people.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Like
You're frightening me.
No, not made out of people, but like.
Okay, good.
But you don't like salt licks. You put them out for cows and sheep or whatever. So you just make them for people. You put a little like a popsicle stick. It's just a big cube of salt. So you just eat whatever. You just lick it. Coffee, lick it. Drink coffee, lick salt.
Oh, I see. So there wouldn't always be salt. I don't think you want a communal lick anything, though.
No, it's personal. You would each get an individual.
So it's a popsicle.
It's a saltsicle.
But it would always be salt?
It's a salt lick, yes.
Well, then where did the coffee... Oh, you're going to flavor the salt.
No. What you do is anything you eat, you would just lick a little bit. Oh, I need some salt. You just lick the salt.
Okay, you guys are having fun. You seem to be handling this well.
All right.
I'm going to leave now.
All right, thanks. Man.
I'm sorry. I'm
Go
sorry.
back
I
to
gotta
work.
go. Okay, bye.
Bye. Mutation 666 says Authy would still be 2 factors because you have a username. That was the suggestion that you use Authy as the single factor to log in. So I guess you could consider the username something you know, but that's not it's not a protected something you know is the thing. It's public something you should. Not sure that works. All the people who have emailed about Squirrel. SQRL, which is Steve Gibson's excellent procedure for getting rid of passwords. I am aware of it. In fact, I hosted one of the Security Nows where he talked about it. And I did send off an email to Steve today to see if we could do an interview about Squirrel. The reason we didn't talk about it on the show about passwords is our discussion was not how do we get rid of passwords. It was why aren't these companies talking about it? So, I mean, the question remains, why aren't they using SQRL? It's open source. Anybody can use it, right? But yeah, I'd love to talk to Steve more about where it's at, how many people have adopted it, explain it a little for people.
Yeah, I think a good overview of what it does and the issues.
Because it's a pretty ingenious system, and nobody has to pay anything to adopt it. Maybe that's the problem. People don't trust it if they can't control it.
So he's down for it. I'd love to spend... I mean, we can do this separately and roll it in, or...
Yeah, I figured we'd just make it a standalone, like we did with Tom's Hardware.
Yeah.
I don't mind doing that more.
Nothing's ever really done by BioCow. It's always a work in progress.
That's true. It's not fully done yet. SQRL. Squirrel.
The only thing I really know about Squirrel is all the YouTube videos where native German speakers try to pronounce squirrel. I don't know why it's... I don't think
that's the same thing.
No, I know. But I just threw that in there as an aside. I guess it stems from the whole belief that Germans are unable to pronounce squirrel. It was used as a passphrase code in World War II.
Ah, is that right?
No, it's a fact. That is
That
what
is that is a myth.
yes, but that is an example of a factoid, something that sounds like a fact but really isn't.
You shouldn't be spreading those.
Yeah, probably. Apocryphal information.
Because somebody just stopped listening right before you made it clear that that wasn't true.
You mean how I want President Taft to be responsible for taffy?
He did like to eat.
It's very.
He
I
was
think
one
he
of
went
our
on the first.
eatiest presidents.
Not a deal meal plan, but he had like a diet, like he had a nutritionist or doctor go through like what he was supposed to eat or limit himself to.
Yeah, but back then they weren't really into weight loss. Having weight was a good thing. Okay, doke.
I wonder if things like deal meal would have sold in the actually no, the 20s depression. People were starving. I guess deal meal really was just a product of its time.
What was deal meal? I don't remember.
That was Richard Simmons, the exercise guy.
Yeah.
And he had that plan where it was a way to kind of count your calorie intake.
So like Weight Watchers.
Yeah, except that he didn't try to sell you a line of frozen meals at the same time. That's the thing that really annoyed me about a lot of those weight loss things. Is that part of their thing was you need to try our shakes or
Oh, Steve wrote back saying yes, he would absolutely do it. So we just need to.
Yeah, no, that's
you probably saw this already, and I hadn't seen it. That's why you were saying it.
Yeah,
we just
I
need
mentioned
to,
it's like, oh, Steve said yes. So do you want to do this? I
didn't catch that. Yes, so we just need to set up a time to do it. All right, awesome. Awesome. Yes, indeedy do. All right. Well, I got nothing else. We're published. I think we're good to go. Thank you all for hanging out with us today. And we will be back tomorrow with E3 wrap up and Patrick Beja.
E3.